like always, appreciate you guys coming out and covering Penn State football. A couple things, obviously, from last week. You guys we already went over the UCLA important statistics that we talk about each week. So those have been covered. You guys saw online, I think the players of the game and things like that. The one thing I will say, kind of going back and watching that game, and also during the game, I think they found a quarterback. I think that quarterback was really impressive for his first start as a freshman. He's a big kid. He's athletic. I thought he was poised. I thought he was very poised. I thought he managed the game well. I thought they called the game well for a first-time starting quarterback as well. But that's probably the biggest thing that stood out to me, and the rest of the things have already been covered. So I'll move on to USC. USC and Lincoln Riley. Obviously, Lincoln's got a history of doing some really, really good things across his career, both at USC and Oklahoma. Obviously, USC speaks for itself, program with tremendous tradition and history, and we're looking forward to this opportunity and the venue. So it should be a great opportunity for us. When you talk about breaking down into the specifics, their offensive coordinator is Josh Henson. But the way I understand it, Lincoln Riley calls the plays. It's been that way for a long time with Lincoln. But Josh, I've known Josh for a long time as well. Got a ton of respect for what they do offensively. They've been able to score points and put up yards for a long time at a lot of different places against a bunch of different teams. So it'll be challenging, and it's always challenging when they got a quarterback, and they do, in Miller Moss, who's done some really good things in his time at USC, back to the bowl game last year. His completion percentage, touchdown to interception ratio, all those things are really good. Running back Woody Marks has been impressive on film. Just literally got done watching again the Minnesota game before coming over here, and really did some nice things, with their tackle wrap play. Did some really nice things in that game. And then Zachariah Branch is a threat, not only on offense as a receiver, but also in the return game. We'll talk about him more later. And then also number 8, Jacoby Lane. Those guys are the guys that stood out to us the most. Defensively, Danton Lynn, who we know very well, is a Penn State grad that they hired from UCLA, came across town to them, had a top 15 defense last year at UCLA, and has done a really good job already at his time at USC, changing that defensive scheme and changing that defensive identity. So this will be a challenge. The guys that jump out to us is defensive end number 6, Anthony Lucas, a transfer from Texas A&M, linebacker number 4, Easton Mascarenas Arnold, an Oregon State transfer, linebacker number 18, Eric Gentry, who we know very well, Arizona State transfer, and then safety number 7, Kamari Ramsey, a UCLA transfer. So a bunch of transfers on the defensive side of the ball that have stood out to us. And then on special teams, Ryan Doherty is a special teams coordinator, and this is, I think, a major emphasis in this game, is their punter number 16, Eddie Chapliski. And then also, obviously, their kick returner, punt returner, Zachariah Branch, has had a very, very explosive career last year and this year as a punt return, kick returner. So he has our attention for sure. So that's pretty much a synopsis. I look forward to answering your questions. Open up the questions.
Let's go to Rich Garcella, followed by Frank Bodani.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Rich. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. Are you getting closer, or are you close to where you want to be as an offense? And do you feel like you've been getting the ball in the hands of your best players, as we heard so much in the offseason?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever be where we want to be on offense and defense. you're always, as I know coming in here, there's always going to be areas that we're going to be looking at and trying to get better at and being critiqued. I get that. I totally get that. And that's always going to be the case, right? But yeah, I think we are doing a good job of getting the ball in our playmakers' hands. Specifically the guys that have been proven commodities already here at Penn State. I still think there's some guys specifically at the wide receiver position that we have to continue to get the ball in their hands to develop that aspect of our offense. The thing that I do think is a positive is there's been a game where, Omari's made some really big plays. There's been games where Trey's made some really big plays and been very productive. And then obviously Liam this past week and Julian has flashed. So, I think that's helpful. We'd like it to be a little bit more consistent. Excuse me. But I think it's helpful that when you watch our tape or when you study us, all those guys have made plays at times, and that's concerning, that it's not just one guy that if you stop this guy, you're going to stop their offense. And obviously our running backs and our tight ends, have been doing it now for a while. Our wide receivers, I really feel like are developing and have really had a nice year so far. I think, as you guys know better than me, that was a big question mark going into the season and a lot of discussion. I think if somebody would tell you before the season kind of where we were at the wide receiver position currently, and you knew that before the season, people I think would be overall pleased, but not satisfied. We still want to develop that area, and I think we're going to need to develop that area as the season goes on.
Let's go to Frank Bodani, followed by Mark Wogenrich.
Hey, good afternoon, James.
Hey, Frank.
Good to see you. Hi. Your offensive line, can you talk about the physicality of it? How much of a difference do you see in terms of that with your line, as far as that mindset, the mentality, the way they're going about blocking? Is it much of a difference to you from, say, last year, years past? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we're more physical as an offense right now. That starts up front, always will. And when I say up front, that's the O-line and tight ends. I think if you look at Tyler Warren's blocking physical, Khalil Dinkins had a couple really physical blocks on Saturday. The O-line, obviously, Venga, got everybody excited with some of the things that he's doing. And it wasn't just the motion stuff. He did some other things as well. So, but it's also, you watch our guys on the sideline. There's been some significant runs on our sideline punishing people that has gotten our sideline to erupt. But there's also been intimidating runs on the opponent's sidelines, finishing runs and not just running out of bounds. So I think we're more physical. I think it starts up front, is your point, and I think we are more physical than we've been in the past. It's something we've worked really hard at promoting. And I think the guys are having fun with it right now, and it's growing. And I think we're starting to build a reputation of being a physical team, which is something we take a lot of pride in.
Let's go to Mark Wogenrich, followed by Mike Gross.
Hey, James. How are you?
Good. How are you, Mark?
Good, thanks. What will you need to see from Nick Singleton this week to make sure he can play Saturday?
Yeah. Again, I thought he was going last Saturday. He didn't practice Tuesday, as you guys know, because I think you're out there on Tuesdays, right? It's Tuesdays you're out there? Wednesday, excuse me. Didn't practice Tuesday. Didn't practice Wednesday when you guys were out there, and then was able to go limited on Thursday and was able to go limited on Friday, which, as you guys know, is not a whole lot. But the trainers take those guys and work them out on their own, so that's part of the evaluation. And then Saturday, I wouldn't say he wasn't 100%, but again, we thought he was going to go. So I guess my point is he was very close to going last week. So as long as we don't have any setbacks this week, I would anticipate him going, and I also would anticipate him practicing, Tuesday and Wednesday. But we'll see how this whole thing plays out. But yeah. we're very confident. I think Nick's very confident talking to him on Sunday that he'll be ready to go.
Let's go to Mike Gross and then Johnny McGonigal.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Good, thanks. When we look at those availability reports every week from the Big Ten, you've had every week you've had 14, 15 names on it. It seems like more than any other team in the conference. And are you, how beat up is your team? And compared to other teams you've coached, and what kind of challenges does that pose other than the obvious, it's better to have Nick Singleton than to not have him? But I mean, like in terms of player development, in terms of ability to run practices, what are the challenges that poses for you?
I guess the first thing I'd ask, Mike, is you made that statement about our team compared to others. Have you looked at that, or are you just saying that?
I have looked at that.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, because I have not, so I'm gonna check that out myself. But yeah, I think I've mentioned to you guys in here that I think we've had more season-ending injuries this year than in years past, and obviously that's not ideal, and that's where the development of the other guys and the depth is always important, but even more important this year. A lot of those have been non-contact, just ones that guys just running, without a hit or rolled up on, just happen. So we spent some time kind of looking at that as a staff and studying that to make sure that we weren't missing anything. But yeah, obviously you'd prefer to be as healthy as you could be. I wouldn't say we're that. As you guys know, I don't talk a whole lot about injuries on the front end, so it's hard to use them on the back end. So we just next man up mentality and keep plugging along and finding ways to develop and create depth. And I think Day-Day Lane's a good example of that. He's getting better each week. We're going to need to continue to do that at safety as well as other positions too. But I think there's been some benefits. Quentin getting in this past week and doing some good things in the reps that he got. The challenge is how do we balance it, right? It's easy just to say play them. But I also want to make sure that we don't look back and the kids don't look back at the end of the year and feel like I wish I would have redshirted. And with the new rules, it allows you to be strategic and try to hold those guys as long as you can until you can't anymore. So that's what we're trying to do.
Let's go to Johnny McGonigal and then Neo Riddell.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Johnny. How are you?
Good. Obviously, we saw what Abdul Carter did against Illinois. I thought Denai was a handful against UCLA, and then Zane Durant's been a handful on the inside all season long. How would you assess the pass rush, both on the interior and on the edges, so far this season, but more specifically Big Ten play?
Yeah, I've been impressed with those guys across the board. I think your point is a good one in terms of Zane. I think we've gotten used to around here defensive ends being disruptive. I don't know the last time we've had a defensive tackle as disruptive as Zane, and now that makes it challenging, right? You got a guy inside that you're watching on tape, and it's a concern. And now you got DNs on either side that can be problematic, and where are you going to pick your poison? I mean, you can't double them all. And if you do, then your back's not getting out, or your running back, or your tight end's not getting out. And, we do some chipping as well and things like that. But, a lot of times when you keep guys in, people are going to add on. So that's not really always the solution. You want to try to get 5 guys out whenever you possibly can. I do think Zane changes things for us and changes things for our opponents and makes it more difficult. I also think the depth that we have at D-tackle and the size that we have at D-tackle has been helpful, not only for the unit and for the productivity, but also to keep Zane fresh as well. So, Dion's doing a really nice job, him and Torrance. I think that position has done a really nice job, and I think Zane's been a guy that I think is becoming more and more of a leader. on our team and specifically on our defense.
Last question on Zoom, Neil Riddell.
Hey, James.
Hey, Neil. How are you, buddy?
How are you?
Good.
Good. I was wondering what you're doing to try to get off to better starts offensively. I'm presuming you guys script the first couple series, but I'm just asking if you're doing that or just what steps you're trying to take to improve that area.
Yes, sir. We do script opening drives. I think most people in the country do that. You don't always stick to the script. But yeah, I think making sure that we get some early throws, high percentage throws, getting the ball into our playmakers' hands, all those types of things. Being able to run the ball and get ahead of the sticks, all those things are really important. And we spent a ton of time talking about it as a staff. And also that's part of your walkthroughs and things like that at the hotel as well as during the week. So we are investing a lot of time in it, and we understand how important it is. And there's nothing that we want more than on really all three phases. We've done it some games on offense, we've done it some games on defense, we've done it some games on special teams. It sure would be beneficial for us to do it in all three phases, which I don't think we've done it in all three phases yet this year.
We'll go to questions in the room over here on the right. Mark.
James, how are you today?
Good, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great. What's the rationale for leaving on Thursday, and will you guys go from here or Harrisburg?
Yeah, so that's your second part of your question is a big part of us leaving on Thursday is we cannot fly out of state college. So that was a big part of our discussions with the Big Ten when all this thing got started, is not only are we one of the most northeast schools, but based on runway length, size of plane, weight of plane, fuel on plane, we can't get out of here unless we would stop for fuel. So with that, we got to fly out of Harrisburg. So, to me, that's one of the things that I think we have to discuss is increasing the size of the runway here and the size of the airport for a lot of reasons, for the university, for the community, for businesses, for the athletic department, and for us now that we've, decided to make this move as a Big Ten. To me, that's something that we need to do for a lot of different reasons. But that's a big part of it is, you're talking about adding another 2 hours to your trip on top of the flight. And I think the flight's already 5.5 hours or whatever it may be. So that's pretty much a full day. So that's one of the big reasons for leaving Thursday. So feel good about our plan. But that's a big reason why, and that's something that I think we're going to need to look at addressing moving forward, because it does change things for us compared to a lot of other teams in our conference that either, even if they are Northeast, they have an international airport and things like that, within a short distance from campus. So we kind of got the double whammy. It's the distance as well as the airport.
In the middle, John.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good, John. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. We've seen you guys deal with some absences at linebacker for various reasons. How would you evaluate how that group has played this year, and do you think it's in a position to be ready to deal with what some of USC does offensively?
Yeah, I think to your point, considering all the moving parts, and we've had a lot at that position, I've been pretty pleased with it overall. I think when you talk about, Dakari, the whole story with Dakari, I think he's probably playing better and gaining more confidence than probably anybody anticipated coming into the season, based on he wasn't even a linebacker at that stage, and is playing and playing well. Elsdon obviously has played a ton of football around here. DeLuca's played a ton of football around here. Having him back is helpful. And then also, as you guys know, Day-Day Lane coming on at safety now also allows us hopefully to get brain fart. Thank you, Jay Reed, Jay Reed, get Jay Reed back playing the Lion position, which I thought in the beginning of the season he was playing really, really well there. So the depth at safety impacts the depth at linebacker and vice versa.
Over on the left, Jared.
Hey, Coach Franklin.
Hey, Jared.
You had 4 games at home, 5-week home stretch, really successful here. How well does that set you up to go on the road and go to California and execute?
Well, I think opening the season in West Virginia, which has a lot of similarities to California, right? I do think that helps. That was a tough environment to play in, open the season that way. I think if you hadn't had one of those types of games, you'd be more concerned. I think as a team, we know kind of our identity now. We're in a much different place at this point. We know who we are. They know who they are. The other thing is we got enough film that you're not, guesstimating who they're going to be. There's enough film evidence to come up with a real game plan on offense, defense, and special teams. So I think all those things help. But as we all know, going on the road in general and going on the road in this conference is challenging. So we're gonna pay them and the situation the respect that it deserves, and we're gonna prepare that way.
In the front, Audrey.
Good afternoon. You mentioned Danton Lynn in the opening statement. I'm wondering, is there any kind of connection between you guys other than him being here? Like, do you know him professionally well or at all or anything like that?
No, I don't know him very well, but I think you guys know I've said this before. Guys from Pennsylvania, guys that are Penn State grads, I track, and obviously the success that he had last year. Obviously he's a guy that we had on our radar and have on our radar. And I want to make sure that I know where all the Penn State grads in the NFL and in college football are coaching, as well as Pennsylvania grads. I just think, Pennsylvania people that were born and raised in this state. I think that's an important piece to be aware of when you're putting your staff together.
In the back there, Shane.
Hey, Coach.
Hey, Shane.
UCLA obviously had some issues as far as their travel. It would have been a 9 a.m. start for them back home. What are some time difference changes or challenges that you see for your team, and how does this prep maybe differ from, say, if you have a bowl game and you have more time to prepare?
So, I'm sorry, one more time. Say one more time.
So basically what I'm saying is what are some of the time difference challenges you anticipate, and how does this prep maybe differ from, like, say, the Rose Bowl or something like that where you have more time?
Yeah, I think there's 2 different ways of looking at it, right, and approaching it. You got the bowl game where you want to get out there early, get adjusted to the climate, get adjusted to the time, all those different things. And when you don't, then you just don't make an issue out of it. You just go, you stick to your normal routine, you play the game, and you get out of there. I also think this is a time of the year where the weather is going to be somewhat similar. I think some of the challenges with the bowl game is not just the time zone differences and things like that. It may be, or is the middle of the winter here in Pennsylvania, and you may be going to play a game in a climate that's very, very different, so that factors in. So I think when it's in season, talking to all the NFL teams and talking to all the college teams that have done it, you want to try to keep your routine as consistent as you possibly can. But that kind of, back to Mark's point, we have some challenges that other schools don't have that we have to factor into our decision-making process and our planning process.
On the right, Tyler.
Hey, James. How are you today?
Hey, Tyler.
Ryan Barker is a guy that, compared to some of the other kickers, maybe not as much of a known commodity of guys who have started for you, guys who have gotten a bunch of FBS offers, maybe someone who transferred in like a Falcons. Barker didn't have those opportunities coming out of high school. So can you tell us what stood out to you about him and your staff when he was in high school, and why he was able to get that walk-on spot here? I'm sure there's dozens of kickers in the state of Pennsylvania who would like to get that spot.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, we loved his statistics. We loved his film. Then we met him, and he's a big, strong guy, so that factored into it as well. Felt like he had a frame that could put on size and strength and increase his kicking power. And then, if I remember correctly, came to camp and kicked well in camp as well. But we still, to be honest with you, didn't know what we were totally getting. And then last year he showed up, and he was like, had opened everybody's eyes and was a real pleasant surprise, and like literally was competing for the job last year. And then again, like I mentioned to you, with less experience, had competed all spring and all training camp again. And again, I would say probably going maybe into the spring or at the end of spring, if I remember correctly, he was the leader. And then early in the summer, he was the leader. And then Sander kind of gradually just slightly overtook him. But it literally came down to the wire. But he's been a guy that since he stepped on campus has been really impressive. I think the thing that I've been most impressed with him is just how steady and level he is. He doesn't get too high. He doesn't get too low. He's got a very mature kind of way about him. I've been very impressed with him. Very, very consistent. Like, it's one of these guys, because the other thing is, okay, you have the statistics to say, okay, you made 91% of your kicks in practice. Okay, fine. But also the thing with him is it's like almost like a machine, like a jugs machine or something. Like a large percentage of his kicks are right down the middle. So it's not just the ones he's making, it's the accuracy of how he makes his kicks too. So, and then I think the big thing, as we all know, that's important at every position, but maybe even more at that position, is how quickly can you flush it and bounce back. And I think that's important at every position. It's probably magnified at the kicking positions because you just don't get as many plays and you don't get as many opportunities, so each play is magnified. But that ability to flush the last play, good or bad, and move on to the next one is really important. And I think from what I've seen from him, he does a very good job of that.
Let's go to Max.
Hey, James.
Hey.
Kind of a big picture question for you. Back in 2022, you made a pretty pointed call to get bigger up front, especially on your defensive line after the Michigan game. Last year, you finished number 1 in rushing in the country. This year, I think you're number 7, under 100 yards. And I think the number is 15 of the last 16. So how far do you feel like you've come in that situation? I know we talk a lot about putting good weight on up front. And what do you attribute it to?
Yeah, I think we've made progress there. Obvious when you just look at the size of our D line and specifically our D tackles. I do think it helps even having a guy like Denai, who's an unusual defensive end at like 270 pounds, and really Amin at 265 pounds. So we're bigger there. I don't know if that necessarily was the plan at DN. It just, those are the body types and how those things worked out. But at D tackle, I think we were a little bit more strategic about that. I think Zane is a guy that just athletically and movement-wise was going to factor in, and he was a guy who was undersized out of high school, and then probably didn't anticipate playing him as a true freshman, and then he came in and he was ready to play as a true freshman, but he was still undersized. So that kind of impacted, the size of your depth at D tackle. But now pretty much just across the board, we got good size. You look at Hakeem Beamon, he'd struggle with his weight for a while. I think he was like 297 last week. So I think it's been a positive for us. And, offensive linemen are trying to get movement to the second level, to take the first level, the defensive linemen, to the second level on double teams to the linebackers. And when you're not able to get movement on those guys, I don't care what type of system you run, even if you're like us, an attacking style front defense where we're trying to penetrate gaps and create tackles for loss and sacks, there's still times where the gap you're going to try to penetrate, they're double teaming you, and you got to be able to hold point. And 5 pounds can make a difference. 10 pounds can make a difference. You look at Venga. Being 350 pounds is unusual, but size is a weapon, just like length and speed and quickness are weapons, and that's one of them. I also think, I can't not give credit to Pat Kraft and Vinny James, and our chefs and the training room. We're probably one of the only top 15 programs in the country that didn't have a football-specific training table. My 11 years here until this year, so I think that's been a real benefit for us as well. Specifically this year, that's been a huge win for us, and it goes more than just calories and pounds. There's also an aspect of your chemistry and your morale on your team. No different than the importance we all know is breaking bread as a family in your own homes. There's value in that on your team as well, that after practice everybody's going in there having a great meal, laughing, spending time together. There's a ton of value in that as well, and that's one of the things I know that we're so excited about as an athletic department. This will be available to all the sports next year. We're just kind of in like a little temporary space for this year, but the entire facility will be done for all the sports next year, and that'll be a huge win for our entire athletic department.
Way in the back, T. Frank.
James, how you doing this week?
Hey, T. Frank, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. We talked a lot about getting Jalen Reed back to the line position in reference to Dejon Lane, but part of that transition would also be playing Zakee Wheatley at the other safety position. So I guess how is your assessment of his play been so far, specifically against the run or in pursuit?
Zakee?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's playing really well. I thought last week he was flashing and playing fast and playing physical. I think you guys also know I talk a lot about team defense, and a lot of times this guy gets the sack because this other defensive lineman penetrated and made it very, very difficult for them to pass it off. It's the same way with safety sometimes tackling. It's a corner setting the edge on a screen where the lineman's coming to block him, and rather than running around the block, a lot of times running around the block is the same as getting blocked. You're still creating space. And the corner being able to set the edge and the defensive end pursuing and the linebacker pursuing allows the safety to play fast and confident because they're able to run an alley where the ball's going to hit, not having to make an open field tackle, which is very different in terms of how you approach it. So I think Zakee continues to play faster, continues to play more aggressive and more confident. And again, I think the other 10 guys in the defense doing their job allows individuals to shine, and Zakee's an example of that.